I'm Theocharis Grigoriadis, and it is a great honor to welcome Professor Woosik Moon at the campus of the Freie Universität Berlin. Professor Moon is a professor emeritus of economics at the Graduate School of International Studies of Seoul National University. He holds his PhD in economics from the Sorbonne, University of Paris in France. And he has an extensive academic and policy career. He has not only been a professor at Seoul National University, but he has also been a member of the Monetary Policy Board of the Bank of Korea, a policy evaluator and advisor at several Korean ministries, such as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Finance. And he has served as a visionary for international education as the chairman for the Global Education Strategy Committee of the Ministry of Education. His works focus on monetary economics, international finance, and monetary integration, and of course also on comparative economics, which is, along with international economics, an area that interests me and several members of the Institute a lot. His most recent publications include a book with Cambridge University Press on monetary policy and central banking in Korea, and another book with Routledge on digital payments and cashless economy, perspectives on Korea. Today, he's going to offer us a comparative insight on the Asian development model and its departures from Western economic development. Professor Moon, welcome to FU Berlin.
Thank you, Theo. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to deliver a lecture in this wonderful campus of Freie University Berlin. It was my first visit to this campus, although, as I said to my colleagues, I had many occasions to visit Berlin. So it's a great honor for me to speak in front of you. And for that, once again, I thank the Institute for East Europe and my colleagues in this institute. Well, as you see, the title of my topic looks a little bit maybe strange, and at the same time provocative. Actually, my presentation might be a little bit provocative, just because I was a student of Seoul University, Seoul National University, and at that time I learned a lot from my professors about the economic development, and then as many of you now understand, the dominant and prevailing view is that the Korea and other Asian countries were very different from Western Europe in their development. And the basic feature of what is called East Asian economic development was government-led or state-led development, which is not the case for European countries, in particular United States. And what I try to show is that this is completely erroneous, in my view. And I think East Asian countries are not different from Western European countries in terms of their development process. Obviously, we have different history, we have different past, but how we can proceed to this development, as you now understand, is more or less the same, process. See, not different at all. You see, so this is my view. So initially, just because Korea was not free and liberal countries, we had this authoritarian regime as many, Eastern European countries had in the past, you see. So development could not be achieved that much, see. And obviously, at that time, government sector is predominant. It decided everything and so on. So still, I think Korea is, from this perspective, is not that much different. See, still, government sector is important and so on. So that's why always, it's the government that did everything, that did great thing. But what about the private sector? People like you, people like Hyundai and Samsung, and I think these Korean corporations, these Korean people like maybe, many Korean K-pop stars, you see, they are more important in the development, see? So I think so far, the dominant view that East Asian countries was government-led, East Asian countries had this government-led development, was more or less a myth, see, which could not be verified. And there is a reason, because officially, the first time that this idea was popped up was based on Japanese, maybe a political scientist. See, they emphasize that East Asia was different and East Asia was government-based. So that's why they could have this different economic performance. And since this was, in my view, taken for granted without examining in detail why, see? So, and then that's why, my view is, so my presentation here is to refute maybe this view, trying to emphasize the role played by the private sector, like individuals and corporations. Okay, so as I said, I think that contrary to the claims of what is called development state or Confucian capitalism. Once again, this Confucian capitalism means that it's always government that played a very important role anyway. So Asian countries developed not because of the government, not because of government-led growth strategy, but because of private sector's innovation made available by the liberal values we adopted from the Western society, basically. You see? So that's why you can continue to grow. You see? So I'll explain. I will one by one in more detail. So for maybe this it's a little bit corrupted, but this shows a very long-term perspective on the economic growth, both in Europe, both in the West, and in East Asia. So, as you understand, the first very important development or economic growth started in Europe, maybe the first time in Italy and northern Italy, and then Holland, and then this is not picked up here, but instead you have the UK, Great Britain, which was a very already in the 18th century they had this a very high level of per capita GDP, which is a very important indicator of the economic development extent. And then this UK, the per capita level was overshadowed by the US maybe in the 20th century. And most of the East Asian economic development started in the 20th century, the first time by Japan. And so that, what is this Japan? This black point shows the growth of Japan anyway. And then in the second part of the 20th century, maybe from the 1960s or from the 1950s, Korea started to develop its economy. We had this takeoff from the 1970s and so on, so that, this red line shows the economic performance of Korea anyway. And then in the 90s, obviously the per capita GDP in Korea was much lower than Japanese. And then right now, almost Korea enjoys almost same level of per capita GDP as Japan. And very recently, some data shows that we have even overtaken Japan anyway. And then from the 1980s, China started its takeoff, so that China is rapidly catching up with Korea and Japan. More importantly, Western countries. Basically, this left side x is expressed in terms of log, so that basically the slope means the growth rate. So as you see, the steep line shows how rapidly these economies went grow. So mostly in the second half of the 20th century, the slope is very rapid. That means actually Japan, for instance, during the period of 1960s to 1990s, the average growth rate was around 5%. In the case of Korea, around the same time, maybe 6% or higher than 6%. And China, as you see, once China started its takeoff, its average growth rate is 8% or 9%. So that's very high. While in many European countries, just because they started their economic growth and takeoff, the growth rate was much lower. But they started their development in the 9th century at latest. So that's why they had this lower growth rate anyway. So it's clear that many Asian countries had successful catch-up anyway. But this catch-up is not global phenomenon. As you see here, for many countries around the world, there is no catch-up, while Asian countries in China could join this catch-up process, so that over time, if this process continues, they they can catch up. That means our level of income is similar to the advanced Western economies, as you see here.
Can you explain which countries are the ASEAN four?
Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and Hong Kong. See, so that's why, many people said that this is a miracle. So you have so-called East Asia miracle anyway. But already, Western countries had this economic development in the 19th century for the first time. And for the first time, people could liberated from this poverty trap. And many scholars called this European miracle. And they thought that this was uniquely European. You see? So it was basically European miracle, and now we have Asian miracle. So actually, I think the same very important forces of development worked. And this was just because we had, as I said, we have this private sector, which could assume more and more important role. That means Korea became, in some sense, liberal country where people are enjoying this liberty on many economic activities. You see. But if you like, what is important, so far the process is understood as a dynamic process taking place over time. But now, well, I'm sorry to say this, but I think this is more or less the fault of political scientists, because they are very much interested in what is called comparative politics. Comparative politics means, okay, we have this cross-section at a given point, 1990 or 2010, 99, okay, so East Asia had this high growth rate, you see? While Western Europe is not. See? So it looks like there is a big difference between Asia on the one side and Europe on the other side. See? But this is not development. This is what you observe at a given point of time. See? So what is important? So that's why probably at a given point in time in the 1950s or in the first half of 20th century, Asia was backward and Europe was advanced. See? So it looks like that there is this maybe a view stressing out the importance of the uniqueness, whether it is European uniqueness or Asian uniqueness. But what is this? Okay, but we know that these days there are a group of scholars emphasizing the role of institutions or ideology, and then what is the most important what I think is is one of the most important institutes is ideology, and so whether we should take the value of liberty, the value of freedom, or not. This is critically important for explaining economic development, because especially the government can be an agent of control, an agent that prevent private sector from developing. So government can be a hindrance to economic growth rather than a promoter of economic growth. This is important. So I do not have the mind to go in deep detail, but probably you can have this maybe a contrasting story between South Korea and North Korea. As mentioned by many scholars, we speak the same language, we are the same people, Korean, but well, initially both countries so poor, clearly, see? But from the long-term perspective, from what is called dynamic process, over time, you see the difference between these two countries in terms of this economic performance is enormous. It's enormous. How can I explain it? In North Korea, we have the famous great leader Kim Jong-un, so everyone should obey his order, and everything should be decided by him. You see, there is no rule of law. His word is the law. He's the superior, he is the king, you see? And in South Korea, we protest in the streets against the government. Oh, this is wrong, this is wrong. We have this liberty to do what you like. See? Okay, I want to make money. Okay, I can do the businesses. I can create businesses. I can, I can be a very famous pop star, so on. This is possible. But in North Korea, no, this is not possible. So that makes a difference. That makes a difference. See? That makes a difference. See? Obviously, and so with this idea in the background, we can see how East Asian countries developed. And the prevailing view is that, well, Asian countries are unique because government is very, very good. Government did everything great, you see? So first time this idea was expressed in terms of development state. And for the political scientists, development state is very famous because it was considered as characterizing East Asian anyway. And then some people in Singapore and Southeast Asian countries started to emphasize, based on their economic performance, the Confucian value. Okay, so right now, until recently, East Asian countries is growing at a high rate, and so this is just because we had the famous Confucian value. Is it really so? Anyway, it's the same story. And very recently, China had this astonishingly high economic growth. And these days, people are talking about China as a future rival to the US and so on. So, again, people are interested in knowing what makes China that successful in terms of economic growth. Okay, so China is not democratic country. Okay, so China had its own maybe value and system, which can be called basing consensus against what is called Washington consensus. Washington consensus is the value we appreciate so far in the liberal democracies. See, while China had its own maybe ideology and so on. So, and all these explanations have one thing in common, which means that it's also the state that was key, that was the most essential in the development. And government intervention is primordial. See? But I think this is again wrong, because they just look at the cross-section realities. See, if I said, well, as I said, if you look at the process of economic development over long term, I think Japan, Korea, China are not different from Western Europe in their development process. See? For instance, recently, everyone agrees that China had its economic takeoff because in 1978, Deng Xiaoping started this, what is called reform and opening. So they can start, they can import technology from Western countries, and they can, people in China could do businesses, and they could establish factories, they could import technologies largely from overseas Chinese, but from other Western countries as well. See, so they could do the same business as Europeans and Americans did maybe a century ago. See, so once again. These Asian countries had this development basically because private sector started to play a role, which was not allowed so far, see, but by this reform and opening, this was allowed. And then, in the case of Korea in particular, many Koreans still cherish the late President Park Chung-hee, who was a dictator, but at the same time, who was perceived as the great leader, maybe. Because from his government, Korea started to have this takeoff anyway. But he reigned for 20 years, from 1960, from 1979, when he was assassinated. Okay? But Korea continued to develop until 2020, even after his death. See? So how could you explain Korean economic development we had without him? See? And then what was really good for him? Basically, I think that what was great for him was that he allowed Korean companies to do businesses freely. See? In fact, he promoted intentionally, which means Korean companies were free from doing the businesses sometimes. It's true that we had Korean companies had this maybe subsidy from the government and so on, but temporary subsidy, I mean, not permanent subsidy like what current Chinese government does, and so on, so that many Korean companies could be promoted. And furthermore, he had a very important public works. You see, I do not have the mind to deny the role of government anyway. Government has always a very important role to play. See, the provision of public goods, for instance, like bridge, or road, or railway, etc., etc. And he had this big, project to build a, road system and so on, so that obviously Korea could be prosperous economically, and at least, and so on. So this process of privatization and liberalization went on without him. So even after 1979, when he was assassinated, Korean economy continued to develop. So from 1980s to 2020, it's 14 years. And from 1960s to 1970, it's just 20 years. And now for 16 years, Korea continued to grow at a high rate. And right now, obviously, it's Korean economy is becoming mature, growth rate is falling, but so far, very successful for the 60 years. 60 years. How can explain this sustained rise in income for the 60 years? It makes big difference. It makes big difference. See? And he governed only 20 years. So that means we cannot explain the economic growth of Korea based on the government, role. See, it's more or less Hyundai, Samsung, and many other very talented Korean people who played a very important role. See? And in that regard, so government can play very important in raising one time or two times the level of income. Maybe good administration can be very helpful to promote to raise the growth rate once and maybe twice like this, you see. But obviously we have the downside risk. Government can make a very bad decision. If that is the case, it can be dropped anyway, see. But this is not development. This is not development, you see. Development means that the sustained rise over time like this, see, like this, 1979 and since. See? So this sustained rise in income, the sustained rise in this growth rate, sustained rise in economic, sustained rise in GDP is more important. So sustainability is the key. Not this one-time rise or two-time rise, you see. So it makes big difference. It makes a big difference. Over 60 years, see? So the key to explaining East Asian economic growth is how to explain this sustainability, not the level. Okay, we are poor, now we are rich. This is not the right perspective. How we can continue to have this growth rate of 3, 4, 5%. Although over time we have this slowdown, but on average we had this maybe 5%. You see? So this is the key. This is the key. And what we see right now, obviously, look at the Korea 1960s. Look at the Korea 1980s. Look at the Korean in 2000. What makes big difference? Right now, private sector is big and prosperous. Individuals, Korean corporations, see? And they are very important. In the 1960s, how many Korean good companies? How many talented Koreans? Not many. Not many. So over time, this expansion of private sector and people doing their business freely without interferences from the government or from the prohibition of the government can do their businesses. For instance, probably you know the Korean K-pop. K-pop became popular just because Korean government removed the ban for the import of Japanese culture. You see? So, and then freedom for the expression, this was important. See? So we had this, private sector development that can explain this sustainability. So now let me go back to maybe some academic explanation, basically, because East Asian miracle was proposed by the World Bank, and World Bank published a book in 1992 under the name of East Asian Miracle, which was, by the way, supported financially by the Japanese government anyway. So and then here the World Bank actually distinguished between 3 types of model: development state, market-friendly state, liberal state. So liberal state refers more or less to the Western democratic economies, see, and market-friendly state and developed states, East Asian countries, maybe in between and so on. See, Korea was more like this one, or Japan maybe, and so on and so on. See, so okay, this model and this model was different. So that's why miracle. But actually, I think this distinction is not on the cross. This distinction should be reinterpreted as the historical process of development. So we started from here, clearly. Or maybe in Eastern Europe, before the reform, state controlled everything. There was no private sector, private property, for instance, so on. And here we had some private sector, and property right existed, but was not well protected at the time anyway. And then we started from here clearly. And then we moved to market-friendly states, so that government role declined, while private sector's role increased. See? And we did not stop here. If we stopped here, I personally think that we never have had such a continuous rise in our level of income. This sustainability could not be achieved. And we moved farther toward the liberal state. So we had active opening, what is called globalization, which can make some difference vis-a-vis Japan. Maybe one reason why Japan is still struggling from its economic malaise is because Japan was so successful, but it stopped there. It did not continue to reform, maybe, you see. So it did not continue to open. It was not that much interested in globalization and so on. So that more or less, that's why Japan was in 1990, it was Japanese economy was stagnant, while Korea moved toward this liberal state, liberalizing not just by the Korean government initiative, but unfortunately, maybe some of you can recall what happened in 1997. Korea had this currency crisis in 1997. And by the IMF, we had to completely liberalize and open our economy. I think that helped a lot, although we paid a lot. See? So that we can move towards. So we had some development. They are there, and that can explain 60 years of economic development in Korea, not by the government. See, so who is a real player in this process? Private sector. And this role of private sector was more or less ignored so far, in my view, in many Asian countries. Why? Because many of these countries are still authoritarian. But I think it's time to change this view. See, government is important. I do not have the mind to deny the role of government, you see. But really important is this. So from this perspective, so initially Korea, here on this side, we have this ideological configuration. So that centralized and maybe a authoritarian system like Soviet Union or North Korea, and Korea started here, And on the other side, we have this liberal economy. The typical case is the US. Basically, ideologically, US and Soviet Union are two ideal, maybe state anyway. You see? And obviously, as we move toward, our economic performance could be better off. But obviously, liberal state is not always perfect, because once this liberty goes too far, then it has some backlash, as we see. So that at least government has some role to play, maybe, you see. So if you go too far, then maybe performance declines. In that case, appropriate role of government. For instance, as a provider of essential public goods is important, and so on, you see. But Korea is not still reaching this point. Korea is like this. And in this configuration, you have China on the other side, maybe Korea and Japan on this side, and so on. See? So we moved. See? This is basically the reason why we have been so far successful. And in that process, this is not different from Western European development process. You see, in the 19th century, see, European countries had maybe similar process of development. See? The difference is the history, obviously, maybe. And the result is that, as you see, map of advanced economies. Which countries are advanced right now? Liberal democracies. See? Although it had its own problem, obviously. See? All. And if you believe in it, clearly there is no future for Hong Kong. Because Hong Kong was one of 4 tigers, see? But Hong Kong is now under the authoritarian Chinese regime, and in fact, that's happening already. The Hong Kong's decade is happening. Singapore is taking over Hong Kong's role as a maybe important East Asian gate to Western countries, and so on. See? So basically, so what is important? Basically, anyway, it's important to have the balance. But so far, we are too skewed leftwards. Government is so omnipresent. See? So that means you cannot decide on your own. See? What is important is this decentralization and this autonomous power of different economic actors, cooperation, individuals. You see? So, and then right now, we young Koreans, as I understand, they are more or less assertive. They are expressing more freely their views. They are more freely criticizing. See? No single idea is rejected. You see, people have different ideas, people discuss, you see, different views should be respected, and so on. And each and every sector of Korea is becoming autonomous. Obviously, this process is not that smooth. Sometimes you have this backlash, and so that we have some difficulties and so on. But overall, this process is rather smooth. So that's why we had this one, you see? And then, that means we can be a successful catch-up country. One day, maybe we can overtake some advanced countries, but so far, this is the main reason. Okay, balance is important. And then, basically, this is my future project. I should elaborate more on. And I said decentralization is important, and this so that we have to take into account the role of autonomous economic actors. You see, in Europe, for instance, if you, probably, I'm here in Berlin, so that the experience of your country much better than me. But at first, maybe, in the 10th or 11th century or before, a long time ago, you have this free city, so that this city was the first very important autonomous voluntary association. Well, when government or king was so powerful, it's very difficult for an individual to resist the order or command of the government or king, so that there is a need for this collective, action. And then a free city was such an important, maybe protector and so on. So basically, city is important, free city, so autonomous city, I mean. So, and in that regard, what is still, politicians, do I have some more time? Okay, so because 5 more minutes, okay. But I personally think it's very important because when it comes to development, I have many students coming from African countries, many developing countries. They are always asking, how could Korea development? And their main interest is to develop their villages. But economic development does not mean the development of villages. No. It's the development of cities. See? So I quote the famous Gandhi's words. The true India is to be found not in its few cities, but in its 700,000 villages. And the growth of the nation depends not on cities, but on its villages. It's a politician's words. It's the opposite. If you believe in it, there is no economic development. You see? So, basically, you see, this is North Korea still. In the 21st century, this is how they are cultivate their, farm. With hands, with basic tools. Korea, 1960s, 70s. It's the southern part of Seoul, which is now fulfilled by high-rise buildings. See? And Hong Kong, Singapore. Now, how in Korea we have big cities like Seoul and Busan. But once we have a couple of cities, big cities like Seoul in Korea, per capita GDP of Korea would be much, much higher. We have only one big metropolitan city. Obviously, I'm not in favor of big metropolitan cities, but actually, city is important because where in cities people can do the businesses more. In villages, no opportunities. But anyway, And then, obviously, private cooperation is important. And now, in Korea, we have Hyundai, Samsung, and so many. You see? They can compete globally with other big Korean companies. So if we have 100 Samsung in Korea, you see, our level of income will be that high. That high. See? But we have only a couple of Samsungs, like Hyundai. See? So, again, the truth. And skilled individuals, like you. So, who is making development? It's you, everyone, talented. Basically, in that case, in terms of the importance of the autonomous agent, I mean, basically, there are two things very important. One is quality, and the other is quantity. Many cities, but good cities. Many corporations, but good corporations. Many individuals with good quality and education. You see? In that case, if that is the case, development is automatically achieved. So who is making this economic development? It's you. Okay, thank you for listening. So I take questions.
Yes, exactly. So we want to open now the floor for questions. The presence of Professor Moon is a very strong signal that we see also Eastern Europe as a transregional field, where comparisons with other major world regions are relevant and very, very important, particularly in these turbulent times. So I would like to ask a question first. Sure. I would like to use the privilege. And basically, I mean, Samsung, Kia, so the Korean national champions, right? So these come out of this jaebol culture, right? These family-based companies where collectivist norms are kind of mixed with capitalist production.
Yes.
So collectivism actually, I mean, you are making the argument that it's basically wrong to think only on Korean development as a top-down authoritarian story. You want to bring the market more strongly into the debate. But one could use this jaebol discussion and tell you, yes, but you see that collectivist norms in the way that we observe them in jaebol are very important.
Yes.
How would you respond to that?
Okay, so simple. Yes, at the beginning, we had jaebol. Family-based associations, because we cannot trust strangers. See, you see? And in Europe, probably it happened in the 16th century in Italy, where you have this big, and so on. You see, so family-based corporations. You see. And as I said at the beginning, Korea was very authoritarian. You can just consider maybe a better version of North Korea. See, so authoritarian, chaebol based, but does we stay at that chaebol state, which was the characterization of many Western observers so far. But I do not think that current Samsung is not what it was 30 years ago. So, for instance, Samsung, they take more foreigners in their businesses. And Hyundai, how many cars are Hyundai producing per year? 10 million cars per year. 10 million cars. By the way, Hyundai is now second largest car automaker. And in Korea, they are selling only 1 million cars. So Hyundai is global businesses. Do you think with the traditional characterization, traditional 재벌 characterized by many Western observers is very unique and so on. Hyundai can manage and compete with German automakers? No. Over time, as I said, well, these initially, clearly, Korean companies are very authoritarian, family-based, and then, the business practice is very, maybe, pre-modern, if you like. But over time, they changed a lot. But I personally think that because Korean government intervention, they cannot perform better. We have many, strange labor regulations and so on. They are preventing Hyundai from doing their business, in particular in Korea. So they are forced to go out. You see? So basically, still, I agree that because obviously we are not completely free from our tradition and past. We are all victims of the past. So that we are authoritarian. So in my mind, I have some authoritarian mind. You see? But what is important is change. This change. So I know what the free discussion, this, liberty to do businesses. You see? In the same way, Hyundai and Samsung have changed a lot in their maybe governance. See, but anyway, they can be completely. They can be newly built without the link to our past. See, Korean society, because anyway, the first founder of Samsung was Korean. He had this education. He had, which was strongly influenced by the Confucian. You see, obviously, but this is not because he was Confucian, as I said, but because he knew how the world changed, and he wanted to do the business in the same way Western European countries, Western European firms did. See? By the way, late President Park allowed it, or sometimes supported it. So over time, and then we have this third generation. See, change. So we continue to change. And actually, what is surprising in Korea is once you have chance to be in Korea, everything changes so quickly. And so what I can tell you is that, I'm sorry for this long, maybe feedback. Who are the current young Korean? Can they communicate better with me or my parents or my grandparents? Or can they better communicate with you? The same generation living in Germany. I think their mindset is much more similar to yours. Not mine, not those of my parents or grandparents. See? But again, when their mind, there is some tradition. So when this public maybe attitude and private interests are well harmonized, they can be very, very powerful. But otherwise you can have some problem. But anyway, so this change explains the performance of Samsung and Hyundai. Yes.
Susanna Stretling, and then more questions.
Students first.
Yes, Alexander.
Yeah.
Or Melbanvel, yeah, whatever.
First of all, thank you for the interesting presentation. In your presentation, you used the GDP per capita
Yes,
and nominal GDP of South Korea as a measurement of the growth. And while
Yes,
I agree that GDP growth per capita in Korea is very significant, of course, the country was out of poverty from the 1960s. I wanted to ask how adequate is this GDP per capita to measure people's well-being, because Korea has certain concerning trends.
Yes.
For example, one of the lowest fertility rates. You talked about sustainability.
Yes.
But South Korea's fertility rate is 0.7.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And there is a prediction that the South Korean population will go down rapidly until the end of the 21st century. Korea has one of the highest suicide rates in the world. South Korea has very high inequality rates, relatively high Gini index. The number of people owning 1 billion won, it's around 700,000 euros, has tripled since last 15 years. South Korea has one of the highest relative poverty rates among the OECD countries. 1 of 6 persons live under the poverty line. So how adequate is this GDP per capita to measure well-being of people, the wealth of people? And
Sure.
did the normal, ordinary people really benefit, or did this money that is in this GDP growth just go to the top 1%, which owns 60% of South Korea's finance wealth, to chaebol family businesses like Samsung, LG, and Hyundai?
So many questions intermingled. So first of all, I agree. GDP is not panacea to measuring the welfare in general, but it's just one of the most important measures. So if GDP is per capita GDP is high enough, I can say that the other welfare measure can be in the same trend, more or less. But obviously, there are other welfare magnitude that does not comply with the GDP. So for instance, this fertility rate, yes. But once again, probably this is, my view is not maybe, prevailing, but I personally think it is more or less, the drop in the fertility rate is more or less spontaneous, and I'm not that much worried about the fall in the fertility rate. These people warning about the drop in fertility rate tends to intentionally emphasize that if that trend goes on, maybe 100 years later there will be no people living in Korean Peninsula. But we know that this is an absurd assumption. See, there is this drop, and then there is this stagnation. There will be some adjustment and so on. Obviously, a Korean number of newly born Korean babies will be smaller. Because why? Because right now, young Koreans cherish the individual value. You see, as an individual, they want to be successful in their business and so on. So that, given the current Korean, society, maybe bearing child and giving good education to giving good education to this new baby is difficult. So young Koreans decided not to bear children, babies, and so on. So basically, I do not see why it's a problem. You see. So I think this is a more obviously we have some unresolved problems, so that poverty, especially for older people, I think the poverty for older people is more serious than the drop in the fertility rate. But we started this development only 60 years ago, so that all the people are still alive. When they are young, they were really poor and they had no way to accumulate money, wealth and so on, so that they remain poor. So belatedly, Korean government decided to maybe introduce this national, pension, etc. But it takes time. It takes time. You see. So once again, if you want to compare the current Korea on the same maybe level with other developed nations, sometimes it's too much. And I said, right now, even in terms of per capita GDP, Korea is inferior. The per capita GDP in Korea is inferior to that of Germany. See? But what I emphasized was the process of development. So we could successfully catch up. But we did not solve all these problems. By the way, I do not think the Germans solved all these problems too, for instance. See? But what is important is to reconcile the role of private sector with the role of government sector. And so far the problem is, well, if I have this question to Korean, many Koreans think that always when there is a problem, they rely on the government. They are just expecting the Korean government to do something for them. They have no idea to solve the problem themselves. See? Koreans tend to rely too much on the government. But economic development means basically you have to do your own business, not rely on government. And probably that's why the economy is not that much loved by many people, because, they are not that much, But anyway, so from this perspective, once we keep on moving, liberate, deregularizing, and actively engage in globalization, I think sometime in the future we can solve the problem more efficiently. But right now, we have always, development means change anyway, and political forces want stability. See, they don't want to change that much anyway. See, in Korea it's the same, but we are not still that prosperous. At that state, we do not change, we do not develop, then there is the gap will be larger and larger over time. So maybe time, it takes time will solve this maybe problem. And again, I think these issues raised by you will be hopefully temporary. Once we continue to on developing, we have the room to solve this more comfortably. You see, so already we have this pension, but basically the real problem is that maybe how many Koreans are paying taxes? 4 people out of 10 are not paying taxes at all in Korea. If 9 people out of 10 does not pay tax, Korean economy should collapse. See? So already, this is just because government is providing too much. under the name of the political stability. See? So, personally, if we continue to move toward more deregulation, we have the capacity to solve the problem. I'm not sure we can really solve the problem, but at least we have the capacity to solve the problem. Anyway.
Yes. Let's continue. Yes?
Also thank you for your presentation. I was wondering what you think about the relationship between growing democratization versus authoritarianism and the implementation of capitalist policies and deregulation. Because I had the impression that according to your presentation, kind of making the economy more capitalist, more open, and more deregulated correlates with kind of fosters democratization as an antidote to authoritarianism. And I'm thinking about all the countries now in the world that are authoritarian and adopt pro-market economic policies and are quite successful. In China, you have the example of Jack Ma from China, or in Singapore, or in Thailand, to different extents of authoritarianism, of course, or in Saudi Arabia, or Russia was kind of, in a way, quite integrated in the global economy before the full-scale invasion as well, but still quite authoritarian. And I was wondering, how does it work? How do you think it works in the UK?
Oh, obviously, there is conflict between politics and economy. See? So we know what is the direction. Basically, two things are important. First one is where we started our development. See? And when we started, it's only this economy in the second half of the 20th century, and Europe started it at much earlier stage. At this stage, Europe had similar problems and so on. But anyway, so right now, if we compare Korea to Germany, for instance, Korea is much more authoritarian. See, so we needed more libertarian value. We need more deregulation, more rational thinking, etc. See, but imagine a country like United States, where individual was really well developed. And then probably it goes too much. So in terms of European standard, there is no welfare state in the US, so that's too much. So obviously in that case, the government will have increasing role to play to provision some necessary welfare services and so on. See? So maybe the balance in between. But once again, most of East Asian countries were under the authoritarian regime. See, Japan was far better because it started, its reform in the second half of the 19th century. So, but so that's why I emphasize this role of liberty, Western value, which played so critical role in Korea. You see, by the way, maybe once it's not just for Korea, but also for global economy as a whole. In the 20th century, we know that world global economic growth was much higher compared to maybe 17th century or before, maybe you see. And one reason why you can be that high rate is just because, for instance, woman was free. Woman works. Until 20th century, woman did not work. So how could you increase per capita GDP without woman working? So obviously at that time, many transactions were not marketized, but these days, obviously, that's marketized. You see? But at least we know that, you see? So labor force doubled as women participate in the labor force. And Korea had this woman participation too, for instance. And because we now have the same value as you, see? Everyone, either man or woman, has this right to work, has the right to choose what they like, and so on, for instance.
Is this really a Western value? I mean, women's rights were introduced also.
I think it's a liberal value, and which was born in Western Europe.
Western countries, America, Germany, had lower
They are
human
different.
rights than Soviet Union in the 1950s. I'm not a fan of the Soviet Union,
Yeah.
but to say that Western values are necessary feminist, I think it's not really true.
I'm not saying about feminist value, but individual, the importance of individual in a society. You see? Woman was not individual, you see, for instance.
Perhaps one small question. Going back to the issue of large corporations, which
Yes.
are essentially making a large share of the economy, one could almost actually speak of an oligopoly. I was wondering, doesn't that kind of hinder also inner-country competitiveness? Doesn't that sort of hinder the emergence of a strong basis for small medium enterprises? Like, for example, we see currently also one of the driving factors of German economic growth is small economic businesses. Currently, also in Poland, lots of small medium businesses are driving the economic growth rate. And if you just have such companies that are branching out in each and every sector of society, also alluring to the young emerging workforce coming straight out of universities, that we are like these big companies, we offer good salaries, and there's lots and lots of competition to get into these companies, and there's also this sort of expectation people have of themselves and families have of these people to get into these companies. And if you don't get into these companies, many are considering themselves as failures, as personal failures. And I mean, to me, that just seems like it's not really supporting entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And right, so I was wondering, despite the fact that for sure maybe these chaebol conglomerates are liberalizing, opening up to some extent, letting foreigners into their companies, they still hold large share of not only economic power but also political power in the country that influences also the resource distribution in the country. That perhaps hinder a competitiveness in the country. How does that come together, and are there perspectives that the government is taking action to support small and medium enterprises?
Okay, so I think that there basically, first of all, we can talk about oligopoly in domestic markets, but Korean companies are competing globally. Korean big companies are competing globally, so that it's not that meaningful to speak of the oligopoly for big Korean companies, because they are already competing globally, which means given the current size of maybe big Korean companies, they can be global oligopoly. Maybe right now Samsung can probably be an oligopoly in some small segment of chip making, probably. But so that on the global scene, there is no question of oligopoly. On domestic market, now we have big companies and small companies, you see, and can big companies like Samsung dominate many small companies? Well, in the past, obviously, yes, much more. But right now, once again, Samsung and big companies have started to realize the importance of working together with small companies. And at the same time, Korean government, insist on protecting these SMEs and so on. So that right now, I think the problem is diminishing. See, but again, because frankly speaking, there is quite important maybe salary gap between big companies and SMEs, so that young people maybe for their career prefer to work in big companies. That's inevitable. You see. So we have that problem, but personally, I do not think that is that much serious. By the way, many talented young people want to create their own businesses right now, as you are doing here. So that if that's the case, so that means the career of working in big companies is not that much highly appreciated. In my age, when I was a student, when I graduated from university, obviously the first option is to work in companies like Samsung. But right now, that changed. Many talented young people want to create their own job and so on. So already that's changing, see? So that this oligopoly problem is not that much serious. And by the way, the connection between political circle and the big Korean company is also collapsing in my view, because these days Korean companies, because we have this change of government. So that so this problem is more or less diminishing at a very rapid pace. See, so I personally think that this oligopoly problem is not real. And by the way, we have very strong fair competition and anti-monopoly commission. So again, this is a change we adopted.
Any more questions, please? I'm very excited that you're so interested in this comparative approach, Eastern Europe, East Asia. I mean, it's really super, the questions you're asking. Yes, any more questions? Susanne?
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. I mean, some of my questions have already been asked, and I just would like to follow up. But I was also thinking about the very fact that, to my knowledge, among OECD countries, South Korea is ranking worst in terms of gender pay gap. So this might also be part of the, I don't know, maybe some cracks in this facade of a successful trajectory, and also about the demographic decline that came along with this economic growth. And maybe also one thing about the urbanization as a success factor. So I have only very superficial knowledge, but as far as I know, kind of Seoul as a sprawling megacity has huge problems when it comes for the entire country, the entire economy. Also, when it comes to housing, a housing crisis that is really prevalent in Seoul, as far as I know. So I'm not really sure that this urbanization is only a success factor. There seems to be a tipping point, certainly. But maybe I could. So I'm not an economist, and this might be the reason why I'm a little. So I'm struggling a little with the fact that economic growth is like an absolute value in itself. But it seemed from your presentation that so liberty, freedom, democracy are kind of preconditions for economic growth. Once you have liberty and freedom, this is the framework where economic growth can develop. and that kind of, it follows from freedom. It almost kind of naturally but automatically, I don't know. But so what happens if economic growth ends? If the economy stagnates, what does that mean for democracy? So if economic growth follows from democracy, does that mean that authoritarianism follows from zero growth or from negative growth? Does that mean if democracy and growth are so much tied or entangled? Maybe this is it's a naive question.
Yes,
And
it's not a naive question. It's a very important. So, first of all, let me say that although we have almost catch up with advanced economies, we are not. This process of catch up is not complete. See, so for instance, when it comes to this wage gap between woman and man, we still have much to improve. But because that means we did not catch up completely. For instance, you see, so it takes time anyway. Given that the current trend we are observing in Korea, I think soon this problem will solve. But it takes time anyway. Once we continue, so and then. Second issue is what I really like to tell is the story of maybe a continuous change, not to compare directly between two different systems. See, what was important, we did not suddenly change maybe from authoritarian to democracy, and so on. We continue to move toward maybe more private proprietorship, more opening, and so on. See? So, so in that sense, maybe government continue to play an important role. See, and so this momentum of growth existed, and still I think we have this momentum of growth. See, because we still have many authoritarian, maybe practices. Labor regulations, and so on. See? And as academicians, for instance, we consider two different ideal states. Okay, it's democracy, and so on. But actually, the current society have all these different elements. Suddenly you can move to democracy, maybe, and so on. Once you politically you can decide to maybe, break this system. You see, but there is this resistance to restore the previous, system and so on. But so that maybe there is some swing. But what is important is that at least we continue to move toward. Many East Asian countries continue to move toward. You see? So imagine many East European countries, as I understand, they are now much better off than when they are command economies. See? Obviously. Between these two periods, see, there are many, if you like, disruptions and confusions. See, but these East Asian countries managed to have this, cherish this libertarian value anyway. So it's not complete. It's not complete, but this small change over time can take very important impact. So new companies could be created. Young generations start to businesses, and maybe sometime in the future, this small business can become very big, like Samsung and so on. So in this sense, this process is important. We cannot directly compare at a given point two different systems.
Yeah, Susanna, your questions basically cover the material of three different courses, right? So basically, first of all, the question of the relationship between democracy and development. Essentially, this is one of the points that gave Acemoglu, Robinson, and Johnson the Nobel Prize last year, because they discussed it. And the key issue was what? That it's first of all not clear what is the arrow. If democracy causes development or if development causes democracy. Do I need to be rich in order to be democratic, or do I need to be democratic in order to be rich? So this is, I personally support the idea that you need to be rich in order to be democratic. Although there are very useful papers, influential work that cover both arrows. So this is a super important question. What we know from empirics, China is richer than India. If we compare two economies that have similar demographics, being a democracy doesn't really help you so much, always. And Korea, it developed as a dictatorship, and now it stabilized as a democracy, right? Because democracy is not always good for development. Democracy means that you have some populists complaining, the government is a friend. I'm
sorry to. Well, I'm not saying about this merit and demerit of democracies, but let me give an example why I am emphasizing this, liberalization. For instance, as you said, okay, Seoul is one big metropolitan city in Korea, so that, and we have, for instance, rather so-called, once again I say, so-called backward region in southern region. The provincial governor of this region, actually, their policy of this provincial government is not to allow any Korean big companies to penetrate, especially this big supermarket, for instance. Big department stores. The governor does not allow maybe Samsung, maybe Hyundai department store to open it in this province. Why? Because they say, well, this introduction of a big department store can disrupt small, shops. See?
Yeah, okay.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Everybody wants a big department store open because it can provide services. But this is what is called Jeolla province. So there is no department store there. No big department store. In all other areas, at least one or two big department stores have their branches, nationwide. But in this region, see, and the governor is saying, they are backward, so they needed money from the government. They need money, but their policy is not.
You say they need supermarkets.
Yeah, this is crazy. This happens in Korea. You see, imagine that maybe one German maybe city prohibit maybe the movement of people. It's collapsing. So I mean, the governor makes people poorer, enjoy less services. You see? Instead, just because this region is poor, they demand money to the central government. So
we have the different phases of Korean development, and I think with that, let's thank Professor Moon.